Hi, I'm Kim Williams, and I wanted to take a minute during National Bullying Prevention Month to talk about a form of bullying or abuse that we don't discuss nearly enough, and that is workplace bullying. Too often we envision the kid in the schoolyard who's making life miserable for so many others. But the reality is, for tens of millions of working Americans, bullying exists in our office spaces, in our restaurants, in our hospitals, and even during Zoom meetings. And when it happens, it can cause enormous harm. For many of us, we're not even completely clear on what workplace bullying is. It's so little discussed that there can be vague definitions or even understandings of what's taking place. For me, I like to look at the EEOC definition of harassment. It's actually pretty clear that when events that occur that a reasonable person would find intimidating, abusive, hostile, threatening, that can become the basis for a claim. And so we have kind of a severe and pervasive standard. So some way of looking at how we want to specify what is harm and what is not. And if you look at the EEOC.gov website, it actually goes into some specific examples of what qualifies and what does not. The challenge with all of this is that in order to take an action against an employer, in order to have some mechanism for accountability, you have to tie these to protected characteristics. And many of us probably know what those means. Those our race, our color, our gender, religion, ethnicity, whether we have a disability, our age if we're over 40. But the challenge with this becomes, how do we prove it? So, if we know these horrible events are taking place, if you can confirm that you've been harassed, you've been humiliated, you've been ostracized in a way that prevents you from doing your job, that you've suffered in some health harming manner, the burden of proof is still incredibly high. And since the 1980s, most courts require some form of proving intent, which can be extremely difficult to do in a modern age where most bullies who are mistreating you may not specifically state, I'm mistreating you because you're a woman, or because of your ethnicity, or your race, or your disability. And so, therefore, the bar is incredibly high. And it excludes so many people, millions of people, because if you can't prove that intent, then whatever you may be experiencing becomes lawful. Now, most people tend to ignore or dismiss or downplay this kind of workplace abuse because it's verbal, because it's air, it's feelings that exist in our mind. But the truth of the matter is that workplace bullying and abuse is very, very tangible and real. And we can measure it a number of ways. One, it leaves scars on the brain. When our jobs are in jeopardy, our whole lives can feel like they're in jeopardy. The threat of a job loss can affect whether you make rent or your mortgage, where your kids go to school, whether you'll be able to eat. And so these are high stakes situations for many, many people. And therefore, we see this show up in brain scans. In fact, folks who've been traumatized at work have brain scans that mirror those of combat veterans. We see it showing up at the doctor's office, beyond just things that you would expect, like depression, anxiety. We see complex PTSD, and we see certain types of breast cancer, well, certain types of cancer, including breast cancer, that have also been attributed to really toxic workplace environments. Beyond that, we see more families break up when one of the partners has been exposed to workplace abuse because they carry that trauma home with them. And worst of all is a suicide, not just in attempts, but in death by suicide. This is literally the epidemic that no one is talking about. But the good news is that change is coming, and it's coming through the proposal of new laws. For more than 20 years, the good folks at End Workplace Abuse have been pushing legislation. And the signature piece, known as the Workplace Psychological Safety Act, would essentially decouple protected characteristics from the actual harm, creating pathways of accountability for employees who've suffered from workplace abuse, particularly when employers knew about this. And it gives us a framework to engage and protect people before it becomes a legal or medical crisis. If you've been bullied, I hope you know that you're not alone and that there are resources available at fairpathproject.com. And if you're an employer, I also hope that you know you're not alone. There are resources on this site, as well as those at mworkplaceabuse.com, where plenty of specialists are set up to offer resources to help people who are trying to build a space that is good and to work in a space that's even better. I'm Kim Williams. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And hopefully, thank you for participating in this movement and lending your voice by reaching out to lawmakers in your area and asking them to consider the Workplace Psychological Safety Act.